It's Luna here. Today I want to share a story that still gives me chills because it's about transformation, respect, and what happens when someone who thought they were too manly finally had to walk a mile in our shoes, literally. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the end of this one. So let me tell you about Gary. Gary always thought being a man meant being tough, controlling, and never, ever showing softness. He grew up believing femininity was weakness. And you know what that did? It made his home feel like a prison. His wife, Betty, slowly stopped dressing up. His daughter, Helen, stopped inviting friends over. Even lipstick or a dress could set him off with his scoffs and cold comments. The house became a place where beauty, softness, and freedom were not allowed. But one night, Helen came home in tears. She told her mom, "I can't bring anyone over. Dad makes them feel uncomfortable. He treats me like I'm dumb for being feminine." And that's when Betty realized enough was enough. She still loved Gary, but she couldn't let this go on. With the help of Gary's own mother, Millie, she came up with a plan. Not revenge, not cruelty, but transformation. A way to make Gary feel what it was like to live on the other side. At first, it was subtle. Herbal teas to calm him. New routines. A therapist visiting under the guise of a health checkup. Gary never questioned it. But slowly, his mind opened. And then one morning, he woke up different. His body felt soft, his face lighter, gentler. His clothes, a silk nightgown. His nails, painted. His reflection in the mirror was unrecognizable. Betty and Millie stepped into the room and said, "Good morning, Missy." At first, he screamed, he shouted, he insisted, "I'm a man." But the mirror told a different story. And for the first time, Gary had to face what it meant to feel small, vulnerable, and judged. His family didn't do this to humiliate him. They did it to teach him. Every day, Betty guided him through new lessons. How to walk gracefully, how to speak with kindness, how to dress with care. And every time Gary tried to fight back, he was reminded this wasn't punishment. This was a second chance. The hardest test? Going out in public. Imagine Gary, now Missy, in a pink dress, soft curls in his hair, walking through a crowded mall. People stared, teenagers giggled, and the old anger inside him burned. But instead of exploding, he had to breathe, smile politely, and keep going. That day broke something inside Gary, but in the best way possible. Because for the first time, he realized what it felt like to live with eyes on you, to be underestimated, to carry yourself despite the whispers. Over weeks, the lessons sank deeper. Respect isn't about fear. Strength isn't about control. Real power, it comes from empathy, kindness, and yes, even softness. By the end, Gary wasn't the same man. He wasn't perfect, but his heart was different. He understood what his wife and daughter had felt for years, and he knew he could never go back to being the man who dismissed their beauty, their femininity, or their worth. After the shock of that first morning, Gary thought he could fight it. He told himself it was temporary, that he'd wait it out and things would go back to normal. But Betty and Millie weren't giving up. Every day had a new challenge. Voice practice, posture lessons, household chores, but done the Missy way. Instead of barking orders, he had to ask kindly. Instead of stomping through the house, he had to move gracefully. At first he resisted. He rolled his eyes, muttered under his breath. But little by little, the resistance wore down. The turning point came when Betty decided it was time for Missy to go outside again. Not just to the mall this time, but to dinner with friends. Imagine that, a crowded restaurant. Conversation, laughter, strangers glancing across the tables. Gary panicked. "I can't do this. People will know. They'll laugh." But Betty only smiled and said, "That's the point. To understand, to feel." Helen helped him get ready. A soft blue dress, simple pearl earrings, a touch of makeup that softened his features just enough. Gary stared at the mirror. hands trembling. He didn't see the man he used to be. He saw someone fragile, exposed. Walking into the restaurant was torture. Every sound felt amplified. Every glance burned into him. He sat at the table, stiff, nervous, his eyes darting everywhere. But here's the twist. Nobody cared. The waiter smiled politely. The women at the next table kept chatting. The world didn't crumble. Slowly, Missy realized the fear had been worse than the reality. And then something unexpected happened. A woman at the bar leaned over and said softly, "That's a lovely dress. You look beautiful." Gary froze. For the first time, he felt what it was like to receive a compliment on femininity, the very thing he had mocked for years. He whispered a thank you, cheeks red, heart pounding. Later that night, back at home, Betty asked, "How did it feel?" Gary hesitated. His pride wanted to deny it, but his voice cracked as he admitted. It felt nice. Scary, but nice. And that was the moment Betty knew. Missy's journey wasn't just about breaking pride anymore. It was about discovering a softer side he never allowed himself to feel. The night after that dinner, Missy couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, replaying the compliment from the stranger at the bar. Part of him liked it, but another part screamed inside, "This isn't me. I'm Gary. I'm the man of this house." By morning, that old pride was burning hot. When Betty walked in with his outfit for the day, a pastel skirt and a soft blouse, Gary snapped. He shoved the clothes off the bed and shouted, "I'm done with this nonsense. I'm not your doll. I'm not Missy. I'm me." For the first time, Betty didn't argue. She just looked at him, calm and steady, and said, "Then prove it. Prove you can be the man you say you are without tearing us down." That silence hit harder than any punishment. Gary froze, but his anger wouldn't let go. He stormed through the house, muttering under his breath, pacing like a caged animal. But here's where it got worse. Helen, his daughter, overheard everything. She stepped into the room and said quietly, "Dad, this isn't just about you. This is about us. You think this is humiliating? Try living for years being afraid of your own father's voice." That cut deep. Gary's hands trembled. His face went pale. But pride is a stubborn thing. Instead of softening, he lashed out. "You think I'm scared? You think I'll bow down to this? I'll walk out right now and never come back." And for the first time since this all began, he tried. He grabbed his jacket, stormed to the door, his heart pounding with rebellion. But when he yanked it open, Millie was standing there. His mother. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She just whispered, "Son, if you leave now, you'll lose us forever." The hallway went silent. Gary's chest heaved. His mind screamed at him to keep walking. But his feet wouldn't move. The weight of his mother's words pinned him in place. Betty stepped forward, holding the same outfit he had thrown aside. Softly but firmly she said, "The choice is yours. Keep living angry, or stay and finally learn respect." Gary's eyes flicked between the door and the clothes. His pride and his fear collided. And in that moment, he realized he didn't know who he was anymore. Gary stood frozen at the doorway. His mother's words echoed in his head. "If you leave now, you'll lose us forever." The air was heavy, the whole family waiting. His pride screamed at him to run. But another voice, one he hadn't listened to in years, whispered, "What if they're right?" His hand slipped off the doorknob. Slowly, almost trembling, he turned back to Betty. She was still holding that outfit he'd thrown aside, a pastel skirt, a blouse with delicate buttons, simple but soft. With a shaky breath, Gary muttered, "I'll stay." The relief in Betty's eyes was clear, but she didn't smile. Instead, she nodded firmly. "Then prove it." That day was different. For the first time, Gary didn't fight when Betty helped him dress. His hands shook as he buttoned the blouse. His face burned when Helen applied a touch of powder and gloss. But he didn't resist. When he finally looked in the mirror, he didn't see Missy forced on him. He saw a reflection that was unfamiliar. Yes, but not frightening. Softer, vulnerable, almost human in a way he hadn't allowed himself to feel in decades. The lesson that day wasn't about walking in heels or practicing posture. It was about listening. Betty sat him down at the table and said, "Missy, today you don't talk. You just listen." And so he did. He listened to Helen talk about her dreams, the way she loved fashion and art, the way she longed to express herself without judgment. He listened to Betty talk about the woman she used to be, before she shrank herself to fit inside his shadow. He even listened to Millie, who admitted she had stayed quiet for too long with his father, watching the same mistakes repeat. By the end, Gary's throat was tight, his eyes wet. He tried to hide it, but Betty noticed. She placed her hand on his and whispered, "Respect starts here, by hearing, not just speaking." For the first time, Gary didn't argue. He just nodded. That night, as he lay in bed, he whispered to himself, "Maybe Missy isn't a punishment. Maybe she's the part of me I buried." But just as he was starting to accept this new truth, something happened the next morning that shook him all over again. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. Betty froze. Millie glanced nervously at Gary. No, at Missy, because standing outside was Helen's best friend, Sarah, someone who had known Gary for years. Gary's stomach dropped. He panicked. "She can't see me like this. She'll laugh. She'll tell everyone." His voice shook as he tried to run back to his room. But Betty held his arm gently. "This is it," she whispered. "Respect isn't learned in hiding. It's learned in being seen." When Sarah walked in, her eyes widened. For a moment, the silence was unbearable. Gary's face burned hot with shame. He wanted the ground to swallow him whole. But then Sarah smiled softly. "Hi, Missy. You look lovely." Those simple words broke him. All the anger, the pride, the years of pretending melted away. His knees buckled, and he sank into the chair, tears spilling down his face. For the first time in decades, Gary, Missy, cried without shame. Sarah came closer and said gently, "You know, I always felt sorry for Betty and Helen. But seeing you now, I think maybe you're finally ready to understand them." And Gary, through sobs, whispered the words no one thought they'd ever hear. "I'm sorry. I see it now. I see all of it." The house fell silent. Betty knelt beside him, brushing a tear from his cheek. Then the lesson is complete. From that day on, Gary wasn't forced into Missy anymore. He chose her. Not every day, not all the time, but enough to remind himself of what he had learned. The skirts, the makeup, the softness, they weren't cages anymore. They were reminders of empathy, respect, and the courage to be vulnerable. And the biggest change? The house. No longer a place of fear, but of laughter, color, and freedom. Betty found her spark again. Helen brought her friends home without shame. And Gary, whether as himself or as Missy, finally understood that true strength doesn't come from control. It comes from compassion. And that, loves, is the end of Gary's journey. From a man trapped by his pride to Missy, a person who finally learned the power of respect and kindness. So tell me in the comments, what part of Missy's journey touched you the most? And do you think she'll keep living as Missy or return to Gary for good? Thank you for following this story with me. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you're here for the next transformation tale. Until then, stay kind, stay true, and stay fabulous.